more and more. So we need to stand up and be very vocal and very united against it.
Okay, to your role as one of the top Republicans in the House of Representatives, what are your expectations when Congress returns? Will Speaker Pelosi cave and send over the articles of impeachment quickly?
Well, it's our duty to turn it over. It's not like some mechanism she can control. The House passed it. They shouldn't have. I mean, you look at what the evidence was, and Speaker Pelosi wanted to talk about the evidence. Every one of their witnesses testified under oath saying there was no crime, saying there was no quid pro quo. Maybe she's trying to carry out her own quid pro quo by acting as if she's got some kind of role in the Senate trial. They had a weak case. I think she knows they had a weak case. There was no evidence and no crime committed. And yet they still wanted to impeach the president to appease their radical base. That's what this was about from the beginning. They've neglected a real agenda for hardworking families, by the way. And so what you're seeing right now is, I think, Pelosi just exposing the fact she has no case and trying to have one more bite at the apple. They're even talking about more impeachments next year. How about they focus on lowering drug prices, securing our border, doing an infrastructure package that they could have done in a bipartisan way. They don't want to do any of that because they've become the party of impeachment. They have this obsession, it seems like, with carrying out this political vendetta that they have against the president instead of working with him to get things done. At least President Trump is working for families and creating jobs, getting an economy that's booming, and higher wages in people's paychecks. That's what we should all be focused on.
Do you believe Speaker Pelosi is overreaching by trying to influence a Senate trial?
Well, it's not her role to go over to the Senate. She could run for the Senate if she wants to be a senator. But the House has a role. The Senate has a role. It's time for the Senate to do their job. Look, for months, she was saying how important it is. They've got to remove this president immediately. He's a threat to their whole way of life. And then once they pass the impeachment, she doesn't want the Senate to get the papers to start the trial. They can't have it both ways. I think people see through this charade. It's a political charade. This is not what our founders intended impeachment to be used for. In fact, they wrote about it. Hamilton talked very specifically about the concern that impeachment would be used to carry out a political vendetta instead of to go after a crime. There was no crime committed. And so now all they're doing is trying to just attack the president personally because their field is so weak on the Democrat side, and the president's done such a great job at fulfilling his promises, the things he actually ran on doing. I wish Barack Obama and Joe Biden would have stood up to Russia and helped Ukraine as much as President Trump has helped Ukraine, selling Javelin missiles, allowing them to stand up to Russia in ways that Barack Obama and Joe Biden wouldn't allow Ukraine to do.
Looking ahead, you've said Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will run a fair trial in the Senate, but Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski was critical this week of coordination between McConnell and the White House. She doesn't seem convinced, Congressman.
Well, you've seen her make statements concerned about what Democrats have been doing and saying as well. And, you've heard Chuck Schumer making comments recently in the last 2 weeks that contradict things that Chuck Schumer, as a candidate for United States Senate, said in 1998 when he was running, saying he was running on a platform in part of acquitting Bill Clinton when he got to vote against impeachment in the House and then went over to the Senate and voted against impeachment there. So in the end, look, the Senate's going to conduct a fair trial. I have confidence in Mitch McConnell doing that. There was not a fair trial in the House, and I think that was very clear. And you see what Pelosi did there, literally shutting down the ability for the minority to even have a day of hearings, which is required under House rules. They broke that rule. They broke a lot of rules to ram through this impeachment charade just because they have a political vendetta against the president. He didn't commit a crime. Their star witnesses said under oath, when asked, can you name an impeachable offense? Was there any bribery? Every one of them said no, and yet they still carried on. The Senate will have a fair trial, and you'll see an acquittal. Everybody knows it's going to end in acquittal. What they haven't done is what I think is just as important. They haven't focused on lowering prescription drug prices, which we passed a bill, by the way, unanimously out of committee. Every Republican, every Democrat voted to lower drug prices. Families would be paying those lower drug prices today because the president would have signed the bill. Pelosi won't bring that to the floor because of this obsession with impeachment.
Connecticut Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal says there are 5 to 10 Republicans with, quote, severe misgivings about McConnell's strategy. Does further delay risk bringing out more Senate GOP concerns?
Well, look, people can question strategy, and everybody might have their own tactics of how they'd go about it. Every impeachment, when you had a Republican a divided House and Senate with the White House. They've always negotiated with the White House to have a fair process. That I think is what's missing in this. There was never an attempt by the Speaker to have any kind of negotiation on a fair process with the White House. It was done with a Republican House and a Democrat president under Clinton. It was done with a Democrat House and a Republican president under Nixon. They negotiated fair terms and processes so that you could have a fair trial. They didn't have that in the House. It was very clear that Pelosi didn't want a fair process. But in the end, it's going to end in acquittal. And so why don't we focus on real things that matter for hardworking families?
Leader McConnell doesn't sound like he's in any rush. Meanwhile, President Trump's down at